Good morning, Year 7. It's Miss Bishop again here. Today we're going to be doing another lesson on American civil rights. And unfortunately today this lesson isn't going to be of a very nice nature. None of these lessons are really, but this one particularly is really not very nice at all. But it is so important that you learn about this, okay? We're going to be learning about Emmett Till today. He was a 14-year-old boy, and his life was a pivotal movement. It was a pivotal point in um, American civil rights and in that kind of trying to rectify all the wrongs that had been done with regards to segregation and keeping black and white people separate. Okay, and the horrific crimes that have been committed against people of colour. So what I want you to do is have a look at this photograph of Emmett, and I want you to try and think, what crimes could he have possibly committed which would have resulted in such horrific injuries, catastrophic injuries to him that killed him. Okay, now this next slide that I'm going to show does have a picture of his body. Now this picture has been put out in the news at the time. It was put out in the magazines. It was, put in the national newspapers. It is widely found on the internet. It is a very famous image. Okay, so I want you to pause the screen, have a think about what crimes he could have committed, and then when you're ready, okay, we will move on to the next slide. So, okay, I want you on your paper, whether you're writing in a book, on paper, or if you're typing this up on a laptop or a tablet, I want you to think, how does this image make you feel? Okay, and what does this image make you think? When you think about this, when you look at this photograph of Emmett, okay, and it is the same boy, it looks like it's not human. It looks like that is a, I don't know, like a something that's made out of plasticine. That doesn't look like a person. He was so horrifically beaten up. So horrifically beaten up. When you look at that picture of him, how does it make you feel? It makes me feel, actually, if I'm honest, it makes me feel a bit sick, because he is so badly beaten up that just makes you feel a bit like squeamish inside, doesn't it? And it makes me think how awful it must have been for this 14-year-old boy to go through such horrific crimes. Okay, now this is the image that was put into papers and into magazines. And this young lad's mum wanted him to have an open casket funeral. So that means that the coffin is laid open so people can pay their respects. We don't do it so much in this country. They do for more kind of prominent figures, maybe for like people that, like the popes, I think, perhaps. And like some other famous people as well that are very prominent in people's lives have open casket funerals. It's more in kind of different, not so much in sort of Church of England, or I think it's more of like a Catholic thing to sort of pay your last respects, because death is a very important part of your life. It's not the end of your life. It is, some people believe the start of another. So his mum wanted to have an open casket funeral so that people could see her son. She didn't want to hide him away. She wanted to show the world how awful the crimes were against him. And she wanted people to see, white and black people alike, how awful these crimes were. So just spend a bit of time, have a look at that image. How does it make you feel, and what does it make you think? Right, I am going to read the story of Emmett Till. Okay, it is in your booklet. However, I want to read it to you, so you don't have to think about reading. You're just listening to me reading it out, and I want you to mind map information as you are listening. So I want you to spend a couple of minutes making this mind map here. Okay. And I want you to think about places. So where was it? Who was involved? When did this crime happen and why did it happen? Okay, that's the most important bit. Why did this horrific crime happen? Okay, so let me just get the photos up that I took of it and I will start reading. So pause the screen here and I will then carry on reading in a second. Okay, so you should have all created that mind map and just made a note of what you need to write about. So, let me turn this screen around so I can read. Oh, what am I doing? So I can read it a bit better. Oh, no. Ooh, what am I doing? So, Emmett Till was born on the 25th of July, 1941. And brutally murdered at the age of just 14. So he was just slightly older than you guys. On the 28th of August, 1955. Emmett's crime was to whistle, so wolf whistle, like that, at a white girl and call her baby. For this crime, Emmett was beaten and had an eye gouged out, so one of his eyes was ripped out from his skull. He was then shot in the head and thrown into the Tallahatchie River with a 70-pound weight, so 70 pound would be about 5 stone, weight tied to his body with barbed wire. So that is so he would sink and they couldn't find his body. His body was in the river for 3 days before it was discovered and pulled out by 2 fishermen. Emmett was raised in Chicago, Illinois, a northern city in America. Although there was still strong racism against black people in the North, there was no segregation, and the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan, was not a strong influence. Those are those white supremacists. They're still around today in certain parts of America. In 1955, Emmett was sent to stay with his uncle Moses, who lived in Money, a small town in the state of Mississippi in the American South. So Emmett used to live in the North and his mum moved him to his uncle's in the South where racism was more prominent. Emmett's mum warned him before he left Mississippi, Emmett's mum warned him that life was very different to Chicago. She said, avoid white people, because although he was able to speak fairly freely to white people in Chicago, so he had white friends, Mississippi was still segregated. On the 24th of August, he went to Bryant's, the local shop, with some boys who lived near his uncle's and who he had made friends with. The shop was owned by a white family. It seems that Emmett had been telling the boys that in Chicago he could chat up white girls. The boys did not believe him, and once in the shop they dared him to flirt with Carolyn Bryant, who was the wife of the owner. Some of the boys said Emmett wolf whistled at Carolyn. Others said he only said bye baby as he left the store. Emmett did not understand the danger he'd put himself in and thought that the matter would blow over. So as you can see, Emmett's crime was wolf whistling and calling someone baby. Now, in the grand scheme of things, it's not really a crime. You know, if you think about murder, arson, rape, not really that much of a crime. When back then, times were different. Obviously now, being wolf whistled at is not a nice thing. But back then, you know, it would have been more acceptable. Carolyn Bryant began telling people what had happened at the shop, and the story spread quickly. When Carolyn's husband, Roy Bryant, was told about the incident, he was furious. Carolyn had exaggerated the story, so she'd made it worse, saying that Emmett had grabbed her by the waist and asked her out for a date when this hadn't happened. So she lied about what he had done to her. She also said that he used unprintable words. So he might have said something rude or sexual towards her. None of this was true. So she had lied and made it worse. So really, she was the reason that he got killed. But Roy Bryant decided that he and his half-brother, Milam, would teach the boy a lesson. A few days later, the two men went to the cabin of Emmett's uncle Moses in the middle of the night. Bryant and Milam grabbed a terrified Emmett and drove off with him, so they kidnapped him. 3 days later, Emmett Till's body was found in the Tallahatchie River. He had been so badly beaten that the corpse was nearly unrecognisable, and his uncle Moses could only positively identify the body because it was wearing an initialed ring. Imagine being beaten up so badly that your family had to identify your body because of the jewellery you had on. Bryant and Milam were arrested for kidnapping, and the Emmett Till case quickly attracted national attention. Emmett's mother had his body shipped back to Chicago. When it arrived, she insisted on an open casket funeral so that all the world could see what they did to my son. Over 4 days, thousands of people saw Emmett's body. Many more African Americans across the country were shocked by the pictures of Emmett, which appeared in Jet magazine. These pictures moved black people in a way that nothing else had. Preachers in black churches stood in their pulpits to tell Emmett's story and demand action, saying that something had to be done in Mississippi now. 5 prominent lawyers stepped forward to defend Milam Bryant. The jury was an all-white jury. Now, so the two killers had 5 of the best lawyers, and the jury was only white. Think about that. Emmett's 64-year-old uncle, Moses, identified Milam and Bryant as the men who had taken Emmett away. Right, so that's Moses. So Moses' bravery encouraged other black people to testify too. However, even with witnesses, it did not make a difference, and the all-white jury returned a not guilty verdict, and Milam Bryant went free. Even though they had admitted, I watched a video on this and I'll put the link up, even though they admitted kidnapping and the crimes they'd committed, they were still declared not guilty. How awful and horrific is that? Emmett was one of a long line of black people murdered in the southern states, but his young age finally began to make black people realise that whether they lived in the north or the south, they had to fight for their civil rights. Okay? That is his story. It is awful. He was beaten up so badly because he wolf whistled at a woman and called her baby. Whether he even wolf whistled at her is another matter. Okay, so I want you to have a little, if you need to replay it. Also, it is in the booklet. Okay, so you can read through it if you would prefer. Okay, the one that was sent out a few weeks ago. So make a mind map of the information as you were listening. If you want to listen to it again, by all means. If you want to read it, by all means. Right, to finish off then today, I want you to create a newspaper article. So you're going to need some plain paper, or you can do it on lined paper, or actually if you're on a laptop, you'll be able to do it in something like Word or PowerPoint or something like that. Stories should be historically accurate, so you need to use the correct dates and places and times, but you can be as creative as you want. Okay, so I want you to create different viewpoints. Okay, so you could be the Southern Sun, a tabloid which seeks to support the Jim Crow laws and present Bryant and Milam in a positive light. So the Southern newspaper is going to be biased towards white people. Or you could be the Northern Star, which is a tabloid which always seeks to promote civil rights movement and promote equality. So this is a more bias towards black people. Okay, so you can either do it from a white person's perspective or you could do it from a black person's perspective, either or. Okay. Oh. So I'll leave this screen up for you. Okay, please send me through anything that you do create. So there's some keywords there for you, just in case you need help. And then that you've got some sentence starters here. Okay, so please pause the screen, have a go at creating your newspaper article. Okay, you need to write it in columns like a newspaper would. Okay, and have a go at writing this boy's life story and the crimes committed against him, either in a white person perspective or a black person's perspective. Okay, so either from the north or from the south. Okay. All right. I will speak to you next week. But any other work you want me to check, please send it in. But I will speak to you soon. Bye.